So the Premiership fixtures have been released for next season, and I think it is the best schedule I think we've seen for a couple of years, which I know is a bit of a niche topic, but I'm going to explain why in the video. It's also still not without its issues, in particular when it comes to certain teams getting on TV, basically Newcastle Falcons. I'll get onto that later on in the video. So drop a comment down below if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel as well, then that's an added bonus. But let's get into it. So as I mentioned in the intro, I appreciate that the Premiership fixture list is a little bit more of a niche topic, but it's still interesting, I think, for a few different reasons. The main one is I think this is the best the schedule has looked for quite a few years, and that might seem like quite a minor point. It's actually massively important. For the last 2 years at least, the Gallagher Premiership has been stop-start. We haven't had the best players play all that regularly. It's all just felt like a bit of a mess, really. I think the last 2 seasons, even though the most recent one, for example, we ended up having a great final at Twickenham, I think the season itself was actually a pretty poor one. I think having a better schedule means there'll just be a lot more of a flow to the season. It will be easier to keep in touch with. We'll lose the bye weeks because we're at 10 teams. We won't be having to have what we've had over the last few years where one team each weekend isn't playing. You lose momentum that way as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons that this schedule makes a lot of sense, and also I think could be much better for the league in hopefully helping it get back on its feet after what's happened over the last few years. Because let's not forget the reason we're at 10 teams, even though this was ultimately the aim, we got to it in a way no one would have wanted to with what we saw happen with Worcester, Wasps and London Irish. So I don't forget that for a second. I'm not glad those things happened. I would much rather those teams were still in existence and fighting to be in the league, but ultimately getting to 10 teams is 100% a positive thing for the league. I just wish it involved promotion, relegation and having a few of those sides I just mentioned in the Championship rather than them having gone into administration. Because I mentioned no bye weeks. The other thing that a 10-team league does is it's reduced the fixture list, number one, and that means we've basically got a 2-month break during the Six Nations, which I think has always been an issue for the Premiership. It will be interesting to see what that does to the competition in terms of just having that longer break and the momentum and all that sort of thing. But it's always been an issue, in my opinion, is that once the Six Nations gets underway, the Premiership gets such little coverage. It's an absolute afterthought. Most of the national press pretty much attribute all of their resources to the Six Nations because that's such a big thing. So it's always been an awkward thing of where the Premiership fits there. I like the idea of at least trying out the fact that we will have a 2-month break. The other reason that that's good as well is it means that for more Premiership fixtures, we're going to have international players playing. And I know rest weeks and rest periods and things like that come into it for those that have been playing for England, but it's no doubt that a big commercial driver of the league is to have the best players playing on a more regular basis. That has been an issue for the league for a while. It's better on a commercial basis. It gets fans through the gates knowing those players will be there. And also I think it's better for the clubs because I've always thought, I've looked at a number of teams when they've signed internationals on really high wages. Kyle Sinclair would be an example at Bristol. As good a player he is, how much are you getting him in terms of game time for the salary that they're being paid? I think if you can get them in your team more regularly in the Premiership, it's a much better thing for the clubs and it's a much, much better thing for the fans as well. I mentioned a potential downside could be the momentum being lost in the Premiership, having such a long break. What I do think it will give teams the opportunity to do, though, and it's something that Bristol have been fairly proactive on doing last year and this year, where they played a South Africa A team last year and they're playing the Crusaders this year, is in that break organise those sorts of almost exhibition games. But I actually think they're quite big commercial drivers for the clubs. I think the South Africa game was a pretty big success for Bristol. I'd imagine the Crusaders will draw a big crowd as well. So any concerns over not having a fixture at home in the Premiership during that time, I think they could work their way around it a different way. And also they're still then getting the players game time. They're not having the players literally not play for 2 months. There will also be Premiership Cup semi-finals and final during that period, but teams always rotate in that competition anyway. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. Other things to like as well is the Derby round. If you haven't seen this, there's a round of Derby fixtures the 17th to 18th of November. This is happening. So we've got Sale against Newcastle, Bristol against Bath, Leicester, Northampton, Quins, Saracens and Exeter playing Gloucester during that period. Again, I think it's quite a nice idea. We see it happen in other sports. Get more eyeballs on it. The big issue I have with this, though, is that all of those matches that I just mentioned will be televised. The exception to that, Sale against Newcastle. And this brings me on to perhaps the biggest downside of what we've seen from this fixture list be released, and that is the amount of TV games that each club gets in the first 11 rounds of the competition. Leicester are top, as you might expect them to be, as being probably the best supported, or certainly one of the best supported clubs. They've got 10 games on TV from their opening 11 rounds. Bottom of the pile is Newcastle Falcons with 3. And what that means is every side, except Bath, who I think have 5 games on TV, every other side has at least double the amount of TV fixtures that Newcastle have. Now, there's various different reasons for this. We know in terms of, I'd imagine, the amount of people that will watch and having a smaller support base and all these sorts of things. But even so, I think if we talk about growing the game, then we need to have more Newcastle fixtures on TV. I'm not saying they should be up near the top. They're always probably going to be closer to the bottom at this moment in time in terms of teams and fixtures on TV. But 3 and, half the amount of basically every other team in the league doesn't quite feel right. And again, going back to that Derby round, Sale, Newcastle, the 2 northern teams in the league, how important Northern Rugby is and trying to grow Northern Rugby, that being the one fixture that isn't on TV, again, just kind of draws into question of how much are the intentions to grow the game and doing what's best for the game. Maybe it's not always going to be the case of what is best for the TV audience, but in terms of growing the game, then that's in all of our interests, including the television companies that I guess decide which of those fixtures they want to televise or not. Having Sale, Newcastle, if you're building it up as a derby, I think it would be better off having that on TV. So that's my only real gripe with this. But let me know in the comments down below what you make of it. I appreciate it is a bit more niche. I do think looking at this fixture list, though, it gets me more excited for the Premiership season than I have been over the last few years. It's always been stop-start. The bye week has been utterly ridiculous. Having an odd number of teams was a joke, frankly, in terms of having a competition that made sense and built momentum and had continuity to it. Hopefully, this is the first start of getting back to that. The likes of the Derby round in terms of growing the game, I think, make commercial sense. Hopefully we can see that be a success. And we've got the various teams. Quins will have their Christmas fixture at Twickenham, which is a big revenue driver for them. Saracens are taking another game to the Tottenham Stadium. Apparently, I saw online when I was just doing a little bit of research, Bristol and I think it was Bristol and Gloucester are looking at the possibility of having a match in Cardiff as well. So different things happening, which hopefully can get the English game domestically a little bit more back on its feet and growing a bit more after what has been a pretty tough couple of years. Certainly the last year has been pretty awful. So that's why I'm positive about this. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. You can like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And I will see you in the next one. Nice one.